The family had just moved into the old house on the edge of town, hoping for a fresh start, but the children quickly began to whisper about strange things happening in their room at night. They spoke of a tall figure standing in the corner, silent but heavy in its presence, like it was watching every move they made. At first the mother laughed softly, brushing off their fears as imagination running wild in a new place. But the father was less certain. One evening, after hearing his daughter cry out, he went upstairs and found small, muddy footprints on the wooden floor that hadn't been there before. The prints trailed from the hallway directly into the children's bedroom and stopped abruptly at the corner where they said the figure stood. No one had been outside, and no one in the family wore shoes that matched the strange marks. The father's chest tightened as he stared at the footprints, realizing that something, or someone, had already made its way inside. That night he sat awake in the darkened hallway, listening, waiting, his eyes drawn again and again to that shadowed corner where the children swore their Papa stood, though he was right there with them. The unease only deepened when his young son began hearing a voice that no one else seemed to hear. It came from the basement, a deep, low sound that called his name over and over again in the dead of night. At first, he whispered about it nervously, but soon he insisted it was his real father speaking to him. Confused and unsettled, the boy finally gave in to curiosity one night and slipped out of bed. The floor creaked under his bare feet as he crept to the basement door, the voice growing louder, more insistent, promising comfort and warmth if he just came closer. His hand trembled on the cold doorknob before twisting it slowly. The door opened with a groan, and the basement yawned wide, filled with blackness. Down below, at the bottom of the stairs, a tall figure waited, its outline resembling a man but too thin, too wrong. The boy's breath caught in his throat as he realized the shadow was shaped like his father, yet the real one was asleep upstairs. The voice called again, deeper this time, echoing through the walls like the house itself was alive. He stood frozen at the threshold, torn between running back to safety or stepping into the dark that had already learned his name. The mirror had always been there, a tall antique piece with an ornate wooden frame, left behind by the house's previous owners. At first, it seemed harmless, even beautiful, and the family placed it in the hallway without much thought. But the children began to notice something unusual. Whenever their father walked past it, his reflection did not look the same as the man they knew. In the glass, his skin was paler, his eyes darker and sunken, as if drained of life. The smile he gave them in reality appeared twisted in the reflection, stretched too wide, hiding something sinister. Day after day, the mirror seemed to change. One morning it showed their father standing still even though he was moving, his reflection staring long after he had gone. Another time, they saw his image turn toward them and whisper, though no sound came out. The family grew terrified, yet the father himself avoided the mirror, almost as if he knew what it was showing. The children began to believe that the mirror was revealing another side of him, a past or a presence they were never meant to see. At night, when the hall was dark, the mirror glowed faintly, and if they dared to look, they would see not their home, but another place altogether, one filled with shadows that stretched toward them. Things only grew stranger when the daughter stumbled upon an old doll hidden in the attic, wearing clothes eerily similar to her father's. She carried it downstairs, thinking it was just a toy, but soon noticed that whenever she said the word, "Papa," the doll seemed to tilt its head, its painted eyes glinting as if alive. The family dismissed it at first, but then odd changes began to happen. The father grew distant, moving stiffly at times, his expressions cold and unnatural. It was as though his gestures echoed the doll's posture, like invisible strings were pulling him into its wooden stillness. One night, as the children whispered their fear, they swore they saw the doll's lips curve into a faint smile. The daughter dropped it onto a chair, but even then, its head turned slowly toward the door, as if waiting for something to enter. The mother grew terrified, convinced that the doll had a hold over her husband. Whenever the father sat down in the same room, his breathing slowed, his eyes dulled, and for brief moments, he looked more like the doll than himself. It became clear to them that the doll was not just a toy but a vessel, and whatever spirit resided in it had already begun to claim their father piece by piece. It was a quiet night when the phone rang, sharp and jarring against the stillness of the house. The mother, half asleep, reached for it with irritation, but the moment she pressed it to her ear, her blood turned cold. On the line was her husband's voice, low and urgent, telling her to take the children and leave the house immediately. The words were filled with desperation, almost a plea. Confused, she turned her head to look at the man sitting right beside her on the couch. He was silent, staring at the TV, but his face seemed oddly stiff, his jaw unmoving, his eyes glassy. Yet the voice on the phone continued, whispering that the man next to her was not her husband at all. She trembled, torn between disbelief and terror, clutching the phone so hard her knuckles turned white. The voice on the other end grew frantic, begging her to protect the children, warning her that it was already too late for him. Slowly, the man beside her turned his head and smiled, a wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far across his face. His skin seemed to ripple, as though something beneath it was pushing to break through. She dropped the phone in shock, hearing the voice still shouting from the floor, while the figure beside her leaned closer, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. At that moment, she realized that whatever was sitting beside her only wore her husband's face. The horror reached its breaking point on the final night, when the family, desperate and exhausted, locked themselves in one room. The mother clutched the children tightly, whispering prayers, while the man they once called Papa stood on the other side of the door, pounding slowly, deliberately, as if savoring their fear. His voice no longer sounded like their father's. It was deeper, layered, filled with something ancient. At last, the pounding stopped, and silence filled the house. Then, with a terrible calm, the voice spoke through the door, admitting the truth. Their father was gone, his body nothing but a vessel now. Something had claimed him long before they even moved into the house, something patient and hungry that had waited for the right time to reveal itself. The children cried, begging for their real father to come back, but the thing outside the door only laughed, a hollow sound that shook the walls. Suddenly, the lights flickered, the door handle turned, and the mother knew the final barrier would not hold. The night was filled with screams, then silence, and in the morning, the house stood still, its windows dark, as though nothing had ever lived there at all.